Again, good morning or good afternoon. My name is Ben Said. I'm the Associate Product Manager for Astroware. I'd like to give a warm Astro welcome to everybody and our speaker, Mike Wall. Before we get started, I just want to go over a quick couple of housekeeping items while we're waiting for more folks to join. First of all, this webinar will be recorded and distributed later this week. So feel free to share it with colleagues. And then for any questions that anybody might have during the webinar, feel free to navigate to either the top or bottom of your screen, depending on what type of device you're using. You should see a Q&A box. You can ask questions there. Some staff from Astro or ProMiles can answer your questions. They might type the response into that box. So where you type your question, you may see a typed response. Any questions that don't get answered via the typed response, hopefully we can get to at the end of the webinar and address questions then. So with that, again, a warm welcome to Mike Wall, load rating engineer, to talk to us about using the BrDR, BrM data exchange feature at Alabama DOT. Thanks, Mike. Take it away.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Wall, as he said, and I wanted to preface this by saying that we are currently using BrDR version 7.5.1 and BrM version 6.7.1. So all the slides that I'll be presenting are from the version 7.5.1 of BrDR. So today I'll be talking about how to prepare your database for the integration, configuring BrDR, how we use this currently at ALDOT, and then the future support for BrDR with the upcoming SNBI changes. So these are things that you'll need to consider when you're preparing your database to sync with BrM. One of those will be your bridge ID and NBI structure ID. Also, whether or not you have bridges split into multiple models. And also, if you're using folder filters to filter out bridges into individual folders, you'll have to consider the bridge name as well as any models that you don't want to sync. So when you sync up your bridges with BrM, you'll be syncing with either the bridge ID or the NBI structure ID. So one of those two will need to match the corresponding bridge ID or NBI structure ID that's in BrM. So at ALDOT, we use the NBI structure ID to sync up, and some of those had a leading character such as a B before the 6 digits. So the number that's in BrM is just the 6-digit ID. So we had to have this corrected, and we had some other cases where it was more than a B, maybe some other kind of text in there. So ProMiles can create a script for some of these adjustments. In our case, they were able to create a script that would remove any leading characters in front of those 6 digits. So if you can go through your database and just make the adjustments to get those numbers ready, then ProMiles may be able to help you with the remainder of that. Another consideration is if you have any bridges that you've split into multiple models. In the case I've got right here in the screenshot, we had sent this bridge to a consultant, and they had sent us back a lot of different models where the bridge was split up. And we typically combine those into one model anyway, but sometimes you may have cases where you've got a really large structure and you've got it split up into multiple models. But when you sync with BrM, it's only going to sync up with the one bin that you have in BrM. So you'll need to combine all your individual models into one if you want it to sync up correctly. Another consideration is using folder filters. So in ALDOT, we use folder filters to group state and interstate routes so that we can easily run a permit through an entire route. But once you sync with BRM, the route is going to follow the hierarchy that's in BRM. So for example, if you have an interstate or a US route, that's going to show up as your route in BrDR rather than whatever you may have defined it with previously. So Alabama uses a unique Alabama ID for each bridge, which has the route in it. We list this in the bridge name field. And the first character is the bridge status, which is O for open or P for proposed. And then we represent what type of route it is, such as interstate, state, or county, with the next two characters. And then the next four characters after that are the route number. So for if it was IN for interstate, then it would have the interstate number after that. So for all open bridges on Alabama 1, it would start with OAL0001, which makes it really easy for us to filter bridges into individual folders. So the way you go in there and set that up is you go into the folder properties for whatever folder you want to filter. And then the way we did it was we went into the attribute text, the bridge name, and said starts with, and then give those leading characters for all the bridges we want to filter into that folder. That way, when you open that folder, only the bridges on Alabama 1 would show up. So the problem with that is by default, the bridge name field in BrDR populates with the bridge name field from BRM, which in this example for bin 2273 is the Edmund Pettus Bridge. So the answer to that was we sponsored an enhancement that would allow users to change some of their BRM fields that sync with BrDR. Now you can go in and change the name field in BrDR so that it syncs with a different field. Also, you may have some models that you don't want to sync. In this case, we did not want our culverts to sync with BRM because we are not currently rating our culverts officially in BrDR. So all the culverts that we have in there, we did not want to sync with BRM. So we also sponsored enhancement for that so that we would be able to change the bridge name field. The way that I recommend doing this is, in our case, we have that Alabama ID that starts with an O or a P. So what I did was we added a C after that leading O for all the culverts. That way, when you get ready to sync your entire database, you can simply sort by bridge name, and then all those bridges that you don't want to sync will be grouped together so that you don't select them when you go to select all the bridges that you want to sync. So you could use any other data field. It doesn't have to be the bridge name, as long as it's not the NBI structure ID or the bridge ID, since those will have to sync up. So now I'll go over setting up BrDR for the first time, and then things that you'll be setting up later on. So the first thing you'll do is enable BRM integration. Then you'll have to enter your BRM endpoint URL and database ID. You've got to set up your custom sync settings, your sync rating settings for syncing ratings with BRM. And then I'll go over some considerations about the owner and maintainer. Then go over configuring your custom parameters, and then setting up your access privileges for your users. So BRM integration will not appear in BrDR by default, just like the load rating tool. So to enable BRM integration, you'll need to log into your admin utility from your Windows menu, and then check the box next to enable BRM integration, and then save your settings there. You'll also have to set up the BRM endpoint URL and database ID. These will have to be configured before you can sync anything, including some of these configuration settings. So to do that, you go into the BrDR configuration window and then go to System Defaults. then you'll go to that general tab, which comes up by default. And then in the box, it says BrM endpoint URL. That's where you enter the URL that you use to log into BrM from your browser. And then you'll need the database ID, which you obtain from your BrM administrator. And then that goes down there in the BrM database ID box. So then you go to the custom sync settings, which is also in the configuration. And you'll have to be sure that that endpoint URL and database ID is entered so that you can click that sync button that's highlighted in the red box. So once you click sync, it'll populate all these fields, and it'll also fill in the BrM bridge table and BrM bridge column boxes with the information from BrM. So then you just go down and check all the boxes that you want to sync up with BrM. Now there's also an override for the name, the bridge name, and the description, which was part of ALDOT's enhancement, so that you can override those values and then choose from the bridge column which values you want to sync with BrM. So in this case now, we've override enabled for the name, and then in the bridge column, we've selected Alabama ID so that it syncs with the Alabama ID number instead of the bridge name. We've also unchecked the sync enabled box for the description so that all the existing data that we have in BrDR for that field is retained. As you can see here on this screen, all the fields that are gray are the ones that are synced with BrM. You see in the name box, we've got the Alabama ID in there, which is what synced up from BrM rather than the name of the bridge. And then the description box, which is still in white, retained the bridge information that we had typed into that box because the sync was not enabled. Now on to the sync rating settings. Again, before you can sync ratings, the BrM vehicles have to be configured, and you have to click on that sync button. You'll go to the BrDR configuration and then to BrM vehicles. And keep in mind, your BrM administrator will need to add these vehicles to BrM so that they can be synced. And then that column on the left, the BrM vehicle, is what's brought in from BrM when you press that sync button. Now on the right, as far as the BrDR vehicle, it'll show you any vehicles that you have configured in BrDR. So you can select the vehicle that corresponds with the BrM vehicle and then check the enabled box. Then on the right side, you've got the default vehicle category. So you can choose which default category you want it to sync up when you push the rating to BrM. Then there's the owner and maintainer. So I figured out when I was testing this that BrDR does not have both the owner and the maintainer. BrM has separate fields for both. So when you sync up with BrM, the maintainer will show up as the owner in BrDR. So you can see in this table here, the owner and maintainer in BrM for the first bridge had the maintainer as the county highway agency and the owner as other state agencies. But in BrDR, when it comes in, it's going to just show the owner as the same as the maintainer. So then you'll want to set up your custom parameters. The first time that you set up BrDR, these would have been entered by the user, such as your counties, districts, or functional classifications. Some of them maybe have left as default, but others you would have to have entered the first time. So most likely, these are not going to match what comes in from BrM. And the first time you sync up, if you don't change these, you're going to get a lot of confusing data. So to be sure what is in BrM matches what's in BrDR, you'll need to sync each of these parameters by selecting the selection criteria dropdown and then clicking sync for each one that you want to sync. The first time that you sync a parameter, I recommend choosing overwrite parameters with BrM data and also remove parameters not found in BrM. If you don't remove the parameters not found in BrM, you'll probably have additional information in there, and it could end up with the wrong data on your bridges. This will also remove any existing entries that don't match BrM that you've entered manually. As always, it'll be necessary to determine what works best for your agency and implement it on your test server to be sure that your data imports as you expect it to. Another important thing you'll have to set up is access privileges. So these are the following privileges that users will need to do these things. The first one will be BrM rating events, and this will be needed if you want to push load ratings to BrM rating events. And then the second is BrM rating vehicles, which you'll only need if you are going to be altering the BrDR vehicles that are mapped to the BrM vehicles. And then the third is linked to BrM bridges, which is the most important one that we use at ALDOT, because this will be necessary for anybody that wants to sync bridge data with the corresponding BrM information. And of course, each user group can be configured to have read, write, create, or delete permissions. To change those access privileges, you go into the BrDR configuration and then select the privilege you want to change and check the boxes corresponding to the rights that you want each group to have, and then save your changes. Now I'll go over the current use at ALDOT. This is how we use the BrM Sync feature to simplify our rating process. We'll go over syncing a single bridge, syncing multiple bridges, and then syncing your ratings. So to sync a single bridge, you have to check out the bridge in question. Of course, if you're creating a new bridge, then it will be checked out when you create it. So then you'll go into the bridge window at the top of the tree and click on Bridge Association. Then it will come up with a box where you'll need to select the corresponding BrM bridge. So you'll put a dot in the yes circle and then click on Select Bridge to the right of that. Then it's going to ask you for your BrM login. So you'll enter your username and password and log in. And then it's going to populate a list of bridges. And this is going to be all of the bridges that you have in BrM. So it could take a while for this to populate. In our case, we have about 16,000 bridges. So it takes about a minute for this window to populate. Once it comes up, you'll just scroll down, select the bridge that you're wanting to sync, and then click OK. Now you should see it in the BrM Bridge ID box. Once you're sure that it's correct, click OK. And then you'll get this message that says it successfully synced bridge data from BrM. And you'll then see all the information populated in the boxes. So then syncing multiple bridges, that's done from the Bridge Explorer. And you can do these in large batches, thousands of bridges at a time. You'll go to the Tools menu and then go to Sync Parameters. Make sure that you have checkout authorizations to sync the bridges. So I recommend just selecting all the bridges that you're planning on syncing and then give yourself checkout permissions for all of them at once. So once you go to the sync parameters, I would recommend choosing overwrite parameters with BrM data because you're going to have existing information in those fields. And if you don't choose this, then it's not going to put anything in there. So then in the Bridge Explorer window, you'll select all the bridges you want to sync by clicking on a bridge and then using Shift click to select a large group at one time, or you can use Control click to select and deselect individual bridges. And as I said before, if you've got certain bridges that you don't want to sync, we organize by bridge name and then use that to filter out some of the bridges that you don't want to sync when you go to select all these. But you can use whatever field works for your agency to sort these bridges and sort out the ones that you don't want to sync. So then you'll go to the Tools menu and click Manage Bridges with all those bridges highlighted. And then it's going to bring up this BrM Manage Bridges window. You've got these options down at the bottom. So there's Link and Sync. Sync is going to synchronize the information for the bridge this one time. Link is going to create an association with that bridge in BrM and also sync it. Bridges can be associated by either bridge ID or the NBI structure ID, whichever one has the correct numbers in it that are going to sync with BrM. So then on this window, you've got the select boxes. So you just select the bridges that you want to sync individually, or you can use the buttons at the bottom to select them all. Or you can just select the ones that are already linked and then click Sync Selected to begin syncing. So in this case, I've got just that bottom bridge selected because it hasn't been linked or synced yet. So once you begin the sync, it's going to bring up this progress window with the activity log that shows the status of each bridge that you had selected to sync. Once it's finished, it'll have a summary at the bottom for a quick overview of how many bridges it processed, how many were linked and synced. And then you can scroll up and look at the individual status for each bridge that you selected. And you can see here for the last bridge on there that it checked out the bridge, linked it with the NBI structure ID, synced it with BrM, and then checked it back in. And if you don't have checkout permissions, then you'll get a message there that it was unable to check out the bridge. You can save this log for future reference because once you close it, as far as I know, you won't be able to go back and look at this again. So save your log if you are interested in keeping a record of that. Now I'll go through syncing ratings. So you'll select the bridge that you want to sync from the Bridge Explorer, and then go to the Rate tab, and then update ratings. Your vehicles and default rating method from your configuration, where I talked about that earlier, will be displayed. So here's where you've set up your BrDR vehicles that can correspond with your BrM vehicles. So there's nothing to change on this window. You'll just click OK, and it'll open the analysis settings. So you'll choose your rating method and your vehicles, all your default analysis settings, and then click OK to perform the rating just as usual. And then you're going to get this BrM rating summary window. So here you can see at the top the analysis method. So you'll select the analysis method that you want to use to publish this event. Keep in mind there's only one analysis method that you can push with this. So for example, if you're running ASR and LFR at the same time, you won't be able to push those ratings as far as I understand. So you'll have to choose one analysis method for this. Then you've got these boxes down at the bottom because you can do this with multiple bridges at one time. So that's where this really becomes powerful, because you could run 10 or 100 bridges and then push the ratings for all of those at once. So you'll go through and decide which ones you want to accept, either by the bridge or by the individual vehicles. And then you'll click on Push to be. So keep in mind, you can change the rating date and the rater initials at the top. You've also got these boxes down at the bottom where you can view the individual rating results or view bridges that were not rated. Now, of course, we're all wondering with the changes coming with the SNBI, how is that going to be supported? Well, currently there's a BrDR BrM SNBI fields tag. So plug going out here if anybody's interested in joining that tag group. They're looking for members. Phase 1 will be to update the existing data exchange feature to support BrM 7's SNBI implementation through the Ashtaware Open API. And we're currently scoping and planning the work for BrDR 7.7 data exchange for BrM 7.1. Phase 2 of this will be to provide additional SNBI data items for the data exchange, and then also look at enhancing existing and providing additional data exchange functionality. With that, do I have any questions?
Thank you, Mike. One question right now. When choosing the method, could it be done as a member alternative so that it selects the method based on how the model is saved?
I'm not sure about that. We haven't used the ratings push very often here yet, so I haven't played with that. We could try it right now if you'd like.
I think we have some time on here. If you'd like to do that, you can.
Okay, can you see BrDR?
No. Richard, I'm going to type you my email address. Just send me an email and I'll get you hooked up with the group.
Okay, you're seeing BrDR now, right?
Yes.
Okay, it looks like member alternative is not an option. We have LFR and LRFR.
Eric, I see you have your hand up. If you could just go to the Q&A box and type your question in. I have it set up where only the presenters can speak. Okay, we've got a couple more questions coming in. The previous person who asked the question said, okay, thank you, no real surprise. We are one of the few states holding onto ASR for as long as possible. So we use all three methods. Okay, we have another question. Is there information model in BRM regarding bridge deck deterioration that is accessible through Open API? That sounds like it might be a BRM question. Somebody is typing an answer to that question. So you'll see that pop up pretty shortly, Riaz. Anybody else have questions?
Can you hear me, Ben?
I sure can.
You may want to promote Zach Boyle is in here. You may want to promote him to the panel. He could answer the BRM questions. Zach, you're here, so we'll put you to work.
Zach, if you can hear us, you can unmute yourself and answer any of those questions.
But okay. Yeah, so the question is about if there are deterioration models for the deck that are accessible through the API. there are some parts of it. That's a great one to reach out to, either email me, Zach Boyle at Mayview, or you can email brm@mayview.com, and I'll watch for it and try and reply to that one. It entirely depends on the specifics of what you're trying to do. So reach out to the BRM team and we can answer that one.
Awesome. Thanks, Zach. All right. I'm not seeing any more questions come in. So with that, I'd like to give a thank you to Mike. Excellent presentation. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for attending. Again, this was recorded and we'll be sending out the recording later this week. When you exit the webinar, you might be prompted to take a survey. So check that out if you do see that. With that, thank you everyone, and have a good rest of your week. Bye now.